So now what are the basic elements of cost? So elements of cost, first is material, labor and expenses, right. So these are the three elements. First is material, second one is labor, and third one is expenses. Okay. The material I can divide into two parts, direct material and indirect material. So material I can divide into two parts, direct material and indirect material. Labor also I can divide into two parts, direct labor and indirect labor. Okay. Expenses also I can divide into two parts, direct expenses and indirect expenses. Okay. So we already discussed what is direct direct cost and what is indirect cost. If you remember, direct cost, just for a recap, I am explaining again. Direct cost is which one? The costs which you can directly assign to the final product, right? Like for example, I gave the same example earlier, that is the steel sheets used for constructing the body of a car, right? That is an example of direct cost. And what is the example of indirect cost? Indirect cost is the cost which you cannot directly assign, like salary of the CEO, right? So it is an indirect cost, right? So this cost again, so indirect cost can be, I can say indirect material. So this is one indirect cost, this is another indirect cost, this is another indirect cost. If I add these three elements, right, what I will get is, it is called overhead. Sorry, it is called overhead, right? And if I add these three, this plus this if I add these three, then what I get is, it is called the prime cost. So if I add direct material plus direct labor plus direct expenses, then it is called prime cost. If I add indirect material plus indirect labor plus indirect expenses, it is called overhead. Fine. And if I add all this, I get what? I get the total cost. So if I add direct material plus direct labor plus direct expenses plus indirect labor plus indirect material plus indirect expenses, if I add all these three, so I will get what? I should get the cost. Now, as I said earlier, that we can define this cost in various ways, right? So here, this is a one way of breaking up the total cost. I can also break up on the basis of functions. Like I can take all the manufacturing costs together, then all the selling and distribution costs together, all administration costs together. That also I can do and calculate the total cost, right? The classification on the basis of on the basis of, say, variability, so variable cost and fixed cost, usually it is done for decision making purposes, right? So when we have to take some managerial decisions, right, at that time we classify the cost on the basis of variability, which we will discuss in the forthcoming chapter on cost volume profit analysis and marginal costing and so on. So material cost. So what is material cost? The substance from which the product is made is known as material. It can be direct as well as indirect. Already we discussed this. This is just a revision. So direct material, it refers to those materials which become major part of the finished product and can be easily traceable to the units. Like examples, raw material, parts of component, purchased or produced, primary packing material, etc. So these are the examples of direct material. If my production increases, the cost of direct material will increase proportionately. If my production decreases, the cost of my direct material will reduce directly. Indirect material, all material which is used for purposes ancillary to production and which can be conveniently assigned to specific physical units is termed as indirect materials, right? For example, oil, grease, etc. Suppose there is a gear cutting machine. Now the company produces 5 different models of car. For all cars, the gears are been manufactured in a particular gear cutting machine. In the gear cutting machine, the lubricating oils are used, right? The greases are used. So it is very difficult to directly assign that with a particular model of car. So this is an example of indirect material, right? The printing and stationery, right? So in company, lot of stationeries are required, notepads, then printed invoices, challans, etc. They are used for the purpose of various models, right? So if a company manufactures 10 different models, so it is very difficult to directly assign that cost to a particular model or car, right? So such an example is, it is called the indirect material. Okay. Labor cost, material is the in manufacturing companies, material is the most important component of most important component of the total cost structure, right? The second most important is the labor, right? So labor cost can be again classified into two parts. One is direct and second one is the indirect. So what is a direct labor? We can define direct labor like, it is defined as the wages paid to workers who are engaged in the production process, whose time can be conveniently and economically traceable to units of products. Here it is important that can be conveniently and economically traceable to the units of products. So as I said earlier, as an example, suppose there is a car manufacturer, right, and there is an assembly line where these cars are getting manufactured, and some workers, they work on this assembly line and produce cars, right? Workers, they produce cars. So these workers, they get salary. They get salary. So this salary, what they are getting, this is an example of the direct labor, right? Because I can trace, right? I can trace it, the salary to the final product, right? Example, here one example is given: wages paid to the compositors in a printing press, to workers in foundry and cast iron, etc., etc. Okay. Indirect labor. So what is indirect? Of course, which cannot be practically traced to specific units of output, right? So example, storekeeper's salary, timekeeper's salary, supervisors, I can say salary of shop, factory shop, accountant. Many times the factory, every manufacturing division, they keep an accountant who keeps the records for production, or keeps the records of the stores and etc., etc. He is not directly involved in the into the production process, right? But indirectly, his service is required for maintaining the record, for running the function smoothly. It is a part of manufacturing expense, right, which we discussed earlier. It is a part of manufacturing expense. So, but it is an example of the indirect labor, because the salary paid to him we can't directly assign to the final product, right. So, then expenses, right, expenses can also be direct or indirect, right. So, what are the direct expenses? These expenses are incurred on a specific cost unit and identifiable with the cost unit. So, you must have understood by this time the what is the meaning of direct cost. Direct cost is the cost which I can directly identify, right, with the final product. If I am unable to directly identify it with the final product, it is called indirect expense. So, examples of what are the examples of direct expense? Examples: cost of special layout, design or drawings, hiring of particular tool or equipment for a job, fees paid to consultants in connection with a job, etc. So, these are the examples of expenses. Okay. What are the examples of indirect expenses? These are the expenses which cannot be directly, conveniently and wholly allocated to the cost center or cost units. Examples: rent, rates and taxes, insurance, power, lighting and heating, depreciation, etc., etc. Okay. So, these are the examples of indirect expenses. Now, if I so these are the types of major types of expenses, and the same cost we can define and categorize depending upon our needs, right. We can, if required, we can make it fixed or variable, classify as fixed and variable, or we can classify on manufacturing, administrative and sales and distribution. We can classify on the basis of time, etc., etc. So, these are, now if I add, right, if I break the component of total cost. So, suppose I have to calculate, my objective is to calculate the total cost. So, if I have to calculate the total cost, we can classify prime cost first, factor cost, cost of production and cost of sales. Fine. So, in a cost sheet, my objective is what? My objective is to calculate the cost of a unit product. Fine. So, for doing that, I can start with the prime cost. So, prime cost, how to calculate prime cost, right? Prime cost is the direct cost. So, this is first, this includes all the direct costs that a company incurs in manufacturing a product, right. So, prime cost is equal to direct material plus direct labor plus direct expenses. So, direct material plus direct labor plus direct expenses is the prime cost. Okay. So, suppose if I take an example, so direct material is 40,000, direct labor is 80,000 and direct expense is 2,000, then what will be my prime cost? My prime cost will be 40,000, that is direct labor, plus 80,000, 40,000 direct material, plus 80,000 direct labor and plus direct expenses 2,000. So, if I add these three, then I should get this prime cost, that is 1,22,000. Okay. So, I repeat again, what is prime cost? Prime cost is the sum of direct labor plus direct material plus direct expenses. So, in this example, direct material is 40,000, direct labor is 80,000 and direct expenses is 2,000. So, if I add these three, direct material plus direct labor plus direct expenses, I get what I get is 1,22,000. Fine. The second item is the factory cost. What is factory cost? Factory cost is prime cost plus the factory expenses. So, it is the sum total of prime cost plus total factory overheads or works overhead, right? Because all direct costs we have already taken in the prime cost. Now, we are taking the indirect costs which are incurred in factory, not taking the administrative overheads or the sales and distribution overheads. We are considering only the factory overheads here, right? So, factory cost is equal to prime cost plus factory expenses. So, here is one example. Find factory cost from the following: material consumed 50,000, productive wages 30,000, unproductive wages 3,000, salary of factory manager 6,000, consumable stores 1,000, oil and grease 500, right? And as if you remember, we discussed the concept of indirect expenses or overhead, right? So, overhead is what? Overhead is sum of indirect material plus indirect labor plus indirect expenses. What is indirect expense? Indirect expenses which you cannot assign directly to the final product. What is indirect labor? Any salary or wage paid to some employee or worker which you cannot directly assign to the final product, right? Unproductive wages also. Now you see, now here you see, if I add now prime cost, right? So, factory cost is what? The prime cost, right? So, I can add prime cost means 50,000, right? This 50,000 will come, direct material plus wages, direct labor, product plus 30,000, right? Now, some unproductive wages are there, which is 3,000, right? Plus this salary of factory manager, this is what? This is an overhead. This is a overhead. This consumable store, this is also example of overhead. This oils and greases, this is also example of overhead. So, I can add 6,000 plus 1,000 plus 500. Now, if you add these two, 50 plus 30, 50,000 plus 30,000 plus 3,000 plus 6,000 plus 1,000 plus 500, it should come to 90,500. Okay. So, you by adding this, you can get the final factory cost. Okay. So, factory cost is the sum of prime cost and factory expenses. Prime cost is what? Sum of direct material plus direct labor plus direct expenses, and factory expenses are all factory overheads, right? Now, next is the cost of production, right? So, it is okay. The next item is the cost of production, right? The cost of production. So, cost of production can be obtained by adding the office or administration overheads to works cost. So, we got the works cost, the total manufacturing cost. Now, we will add what? We will add the administration overheads, right? So, cost of production is equal to works cost plus office and administrative expenses. Okay. So, first we have taken the prime cost. With the prime cost, we added the factory overheads. Now, we are adding the administrative overhead to it. Now, find prime cost is equal to 50,000, factory expenses is equal to 40,000, office and administrative expenses is equal to 40,000, right? So I can add, so I need to calculate what? I need to calculate the cost of production. So cost of production is equal to prime cost plus factory overhead plus the administration overhead, right? So if I add these three, then how much I am getting? I am getting 1,30,000, which is same as this, right? So this is my cost of production. From cost of production, the next level is called the cost of sales, right? So what is cost of sales? The selling cost or the cost of sales is obtained. The selling cost or the cost of sales is obtained by adding the selling and distribution overheads to the cost of goods sold, right? So cost of sales is equal to prime cost plus factory overheads plus say office and administrative overheads plus selling expenses. Fine. So this is a new thing here, the selling expenses, to arrive at the cost of sales. So find cost of sales from the following prime cost is equal to 1 lakh. So prime cost is given 1 lakh plus factory overheads. Factory overheads how much? 50,000 here, 50,000, right? Plus office and administrative overheads 40,000, right? Plus selling and distribution expenses 30,000. So you are getting how much if you add this to 2,20,000, which is same as this. So we have taken prime cost first. With prime cost, we added the factory overheads. With that, we added the administrative overhead, and now we are adding the selling and distribution overheads to arrive at the cost of sales. Fine, okay. So this is the cost sheet, general cost sheet pro forma, right? So it is used for calculating the cost per unit. So how it happens? So I need to calculate first the material consumed, right? So what is the formula for material consumed? So material consumed is equal to opening stock of material plus raw material purchase minus closing stock, right? So material consumed is opening stock plus raw material purchase minus closing stock. So we can do one example here. Say here also it is the same thing is written, right? Also add the purchasing expenses. Like for example, cost of carriage inward, the transportation cost paid for bringing in the the material from the seller's go down to the own factory, right? That is the additional cost. Minus the closing stock of raw material, we can say the material consumed. Okay, so you can take one example. Say here, say for any company, the opening stock is say 10,000, right? And they made a purchase of say 2 lakh, right? And they also incurred 20,000 as the purchasing expense, right? So total is how much? 2,30,000, right, minus the closing stock, right. Suppose the closing stock is say 40,000. So what is the material consumed? 1,90,000, right. So that's how we can calculate the raw material consumed. Fine. With that, you add the direct labor or wages. Say the direct labor is 50,000, right? And there are other direct expenses involved in this. Suppose say what can be the example of other direct expenses? So electricity used for uh, uh, say running the machine, for example. If the machine produces only one product, right? In such a case, the electricity used for, so it is the example of direct. So direct expense is say 20,000. So what is my prime cost? My prime cost is 1,90,000 plus 50, that is 2,40,000, 2,40,000 plus 20, so it is 2,60,000. So this is my prime cost. Okay, fine. So first when we calculate the what is the purpose of cost sheet? Purpose of cost sheet is to calculate the unit cost, right. So what we can do is, we will see later on, we can take the total costs like this, and then at the end we can divide the total cost by the number of units, right, and we can arrive at the per unit cost. So like this we can prime cost we can calculate the raw material consumed plus the labor plus the direct expenses. So we can calculate the prime cost here. Okay. Now uh, from the prime cost, right, we need to add what? We need to add the factory overheads, right, not the other overheads, not the selling and distribution overhead or the administration overhead. We need to add only the production overheads, right. So what is the prime cost we have taken? I am just carrying is 2,60,000. So I can do it like this. So I am say carried forward just to, for a better understanding, I am writing this. So it is, you see, it is coming 2,60,000 from here, right. So this is my prime cost. So with the prime cost, this is my prime cost, right? Right? I can delete this. Okay. This is my prime cost, 2,60,000. Now I am adding the overheads, right? Overheads particularly related to the factory overheads. Suppose the factory overhead rent I am paying say 10,000, right. Electricity charges I am paying say 20,000. Other indirect material like grease, lubricating oils, etc., suppose that is 30,000. Other indirect wages is say 10,000, right. There, when there is a production going on, you have to employ some managers, some supervisors. Suppose their salary is say 80,000, right. There are some other supporting staffs, maybe their peons and all, their salary is again say 20,000, right. You are paying insurance of for the factory 10,000, and for depreciation you are paying say 30,000. So if you add all this, right, so you will get what? You will get the works cost. Fine, you will get the works cost. So we can add like this. T, that is 60, 60, 1 lakh 50, it is 2 lakh 10. Let me make 2 columns here. So it is 2 lakh 60. Let me make 2 columns here. So in the outer column, if I write, it is 2 lakh 10. Let's check it once again. Yeah, 2 lakh 10, right? So my works cost is how much? 2 lakh 60 plus 2 lakh 10, 4 lakh 70, right? So it is 4 lakh 70, that is the works cost which is incurred. Fine. So from a prime cost, we can arrive at the work cost in this way. Now once the works cost, right, is been arrived, right? So I am again carrying it over here for better understanding. So it is works cost. So I am arriving it here. It is 4 lakh 70. So I can write here 4 lakh 70. Now you see, there are some in the assembly, the final production line, there will be some units which are semi-finished, right? They are called work in progress. Work in progress means they are not yet in the raw material, not yet in the finished stage, neither their production process is entirely finished, nor they are in the raw material stage, they are partly completed. Work in progress means partly completed, right? So partly completed, so we will add the opening stock, and deduct the closing stock. So what we will do, we will add the opening WIP and deduct the. So I will do like this. Suppose opening WIP is say 10,000, right? And we will deduct the closing WIP, say it is 5,000. So I am getting how much? 4 lakh 75, right? So before adjusting the WIP, the works cost was 4 lakh 70. After adjusting the WIP, work in progress, it is 4 lakh 75. With that, what we will do, we will add all the administration overheads to arrive at the cost of production, right? So administrative overheads, so office rent, right? The factory rent we have taken in the factory overhead, right? The office rent we will take on the under the administration overhead. Say the office rent is say 20,000, right? Asset depreciation, right? This is say 10,000, right? This depreciation is different from the factory machinery depreciation, okay? General charges, other common expenses, right? Like stationaries, then electricity used for lighting the offices, etc., etc. So it is, suppose it is 20,000 again. Audit fees, you need to get your accounts audited, right? So audit fees is again 5,000, right? Bank charges, so because as a company you must have a bank account and you deal a lot with through the bank, so bank will charge for it. So bank charges is say again 5,000. Other miscellaneous office expenses, small expenses, right? Miscellaneous, say it is 10,000. Now if you add this, right, if you add this expenses, so it will get how much? 20 plus 10, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70. So it is 70,000, right? If you add 70,000 here, so you are getting how much? 5,000, 545,000. This is your cost of production, right? 545,000. This is your cost of production. With this, right, if you add the opening stock of finished goods and deduct the closing stock of finished goods, you will get the cost of goods sold. So say with this we are adding, say the opening stock of finished good is say 20,000 and closing stock is minus say 10,000, right? So final figure what we are getting? We are getting 5,55,000. So this is your cost of goods sold. So, this is the process of calculating the unit cost, right? Calculating the unit cost of a product, right? Now, once you will arrive at the cost of goods sold, right, then next item is, so your production is complete, right? So, it is your finished goods is ready to in your for dispatch in your factory, right? So, next what you will do is you will add the selling and distribution over it, right? Because from factory complex it needs to reach the ultimate consumer, the end consumer. So, you need to add selling and distribution over it. So, for that, first is you need to pay the commissions. Suppose you paid the commission of 2000, right? I am again I am, for understanding, cost of goods sold 5,55,000, I am carrying it here, cost of goods sold 5,55,000, right? So, we are doing this. Now, commissions 2000, salary sales, right? Sales salary you can take as say 10,000, right? Traveling expenses I am taking another, because the salesmen they need to travel, right? Advertisement I am taking say 30,000. Delivery expenses I am taking say 3,000, right? Sales tax at the rate of 5%. So, sales tax we do not know, sales tax we need to calculate, but anyway I can take, suppose it is again 10,000, right? Bad debts I am taking again 5,000, right? So, if I add all of these, right, let us write this on the in the outer column, then it will be easier to understand. So, I am writing it here 555,000, right? This is the cost of goods sold, fine. So, with this if I add this, so 12, 32, 62, 65, 75, 80. So, if I add it is 80,000, right. So, cost of sales is how much? I can add these two. So, it is 5, 13, 6,35,000, right. This is my cost of sales, right. On that I am taking 30% profit, right. So, I can calculate 6,35,000 into 30%. So, it should be, I can see, let me do this, let me do like this. One 190,500. Let's check it again. So, 3,300,20,15 should know 190,500. So, if you add this, then it will be 500,5 1 or 2 825,500. Let's check the addition again, 0055 825,500, fine. So, this is my sales, this is my sales value. So, This way, we can calculate the overall cost of a product by adding first the prime cost. With the prime cost, we can add the factory overheads, then we can add the administrative overheads, and then we can add the selling and distribution overheads. Fine. So, here is one example given. You see, calculate the prime cost, factory cost, cost of production, cost of sales and profit from the following particulars. So, you see all the elements, cost elements are given here: direct material, direct wages, wages of foreman, electric power, lighting, storekeeper wages, oil and water, rent, repairs and renewal. All the costs are given. Here is also consumable stores, manager's salary, director fees, office stationery, telephone charges, postage, salesman's salary, traveling expense, advertising, warehousing, sales, carriage in outward and dividend. So, it is given here. So, here you see the figures are placed here. There was no opening stock of material and purchase source. Directly this raw material consumed is given, which is 1 lakh plus direct labor, no direct expenses. So, this is my prime cost 1 lakh 30. With that, the overhead expenses, factory overhead expenses are added. Wage for foreman, electric power, lighting factory, storekeeper wages, oil and water, rent, repairs and renewal, depreciation, consumable stores. So, works cost is 1,47,500. Add opening, there is no opening stock and closing stock. So, our works cost is 1,47,500. With that, the administration overheads are added. Manager's salary, director fees, office stationery, telephone charges, postage and telegram, lightning office, rent, depreciation, etc. So, I am getting the cost of production, right. So, my cost of goods sold is this 1,58,875. With that, I am adding all the selling and distribution overheads. So, salesman's salary, advertising, traveling expenses, warehouse charges, carriage outward. I am getting the cost of sales 1,62,750. Adding profit of 26,750, my sales is 1,89,500. Okay. So, this way we can add all these cost elements to calculate, right, the unit cost. Now, if I go back to the previous example, suppose say here which we calculated. So, in this example, the total sales is 825,500 and my total cost of sales is 6,35,000. Now, suppose the number of units produced is say 1000 units, right. If it is like this, then what is my cost of sales per unit? So, I can divide 6,35,000 divided by 1000. So, it gives me rupees 635. So, this is my cost of sales per unit, right. So, I can arrive at the per unit cost like this. Okay. So, we are stopping here. Thank you. Thank you very much.